The great starship Aurora Line glided through the dark ocean of space, carrying hundreds of travelers to a new colony world. Inside the bright cabin, people of many cultures sat quietly, some reading, some speaking softly, and some simply gazing out of the wide glass windows at the endless stars. It was supposed to be a peaceful journey, but one small boy was struggling in a way no one expected. Ravi was the only son of a wealthy trader. His father, Mehul, was a man respected in business circles. He wore fine clothes and traveled often between planets to manage trade routes and deals. Many people in the cabin knew him by name. But it was not the father who drew attention that day. It was his child. Ravi was a gentle boy who lived in his own world. He had autism, which made many things difficult for him: bright lights, sudden noises, the hum of engines, and even the sound of too many voices around him. On Earth, at home, he had ways to stay calm. He had his soft blanket, his corner filled with little toys, and his quiet space where no one disturbed him. But on the spaceship, everything felt different. The engines were loud, the lights above were too sharp, and the voices of strangers filled every corner. Ravi felt as if all these sounds and lights were pressing on him at the same time. He covered his ears and shut his eyes tightly, but the pressure would not leave. His chest felt heavy, and soon his small voice broke into a cry. At first, it was soft, just a whimper, but slowly it grew louder, echoing through the cabin. Passengers turned their heads. Some looked with concern, but many frowned. Space travel was long and tiring, and people often wished for silence during the journey. A crying child was the last thing they wanted. A woman whispered to her neighbor. A man shook his head. The air inside the cabin grew restless. Mehul leaned close to his son, whispering his name again and again. Ravi, it's okay, my son. Look at me, just look at me. But Ravi could not hear his father's soft words through the storm inside his mind. He shook his head hard, pressing his small hands tighter against his ears. His cries turned into screams, high and sharp, filling every corner of the ship. Mehul's face turned pale. For all his wealth and knowledge, he had no power in this moment. He tried everything, offering Ravi his favorite snacks, holding his hand, even trying to sing a quiet tune. But nothing worked. The more people stared, the more helpless Mehul felt. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, judging silently. In the back rows, a young boy named Kofi sat with his grandmother. Kofi did not wear fine clothes. His shirt was simple, his shoes slightly worn. He had no bags of treasures, no sign of riches. But he had something else, something that could not be bought. He had a quiet patience. While others frowned, Kofi simply watched. He did not see Ravi as a problem or disturbance. He saw a boy who was lost in a storm he could not escape. Kofi knew how it felt to be lost, because he too had faced moments when the world seemed too big and too loud. His grandmother had always told him, when someone suffers, do not look away. Even the smallest hand can bring comfort. For now, Kofi stayed in his seat. His grandmother placed her hand gently on his arm, as if reminding him to wait. But Kofi's eyes stayed on Ravi. He noticed something others did not. Behind the cries and screams, Ravi's hands kept moving in little patterns, as if searching for something to hold onto, something to focus on. Meanwhile, the cabin crew tried to offer help. One attendant walked over with a soft blanket, but Ravi pushed it away. Another brought a small drink, but Ravi turned his face and screamed louder. The whispers grew louder too. Some passengers began to sigh loudly, making sure their frustration was heard. Mehul bowed his head. He felt trapped between his son's pain and the passengers' judgment. He whispered again, Ravi, please, my child, calm down. But he knew Ravi could not hear. Outside the wide glass windows, the stars continued to shine calmly, far away and untouched by the struggles inside the ship. The aurora line moved forward smoothly, but inside, time felt heavy, stretched by every scream and every restless sigh. Ravi curled himself on the seat, face hidden against his knees. His small shoulders shook, and his cries softened for a moment, only to rise again. The boy was caught in a loop of fear and sound, unable to break free. And so, the journey that was supposed to be peaceful had turned into a silent test for everyone on board. Some failed it by showing impatience. Some chose to ignore it. But one quiet boy, seated far from the noise, was already thinking of a way no one expected. The story of this flight was only beginning. And before it ended, the passengers would see something they would never forget, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness could calm even the loudest storm. The hum of the great starship continued steadily, but inside the passenger cabin the mood was uneasy. Ravi's cries had lasted many minutes, and each second felt longer than the one before. The soft lights above seemed harsher, the gentle hum of engines now felt like a loud drum when mixed with the boy's voice. People shifted in their seats. Some pulled their headrests higher, hoping to block the sound. Others sighed or whispered to each other. Every small sound of disapproval reached Mehul's ears like arrows. He was not only a father in that moment, he was also a man of status, someone others expected to control every situation. Yet here he sat, helpless. Mehul gently stroked Ravi's back. "It's okay, my son. We are safe. Look outside, see the stars." He pointed to the wide glass window where galaxies sparkled like spilled jewels. But Ravi did not look. His hands stayed pressed to his ears, his body curled tighter. Near the middle of the cabin, an elderly man shook his head. "Children should be kept calm before boarding," he muttered. His neighbor nodded. A young woman across the aisle frowned as she tried to read her book. She closed it with a snap and crossed her arms. The whispers grew like waves. They were not cruel, but they were heavy with irritation. Some passengers looked at the father with silent blame, as if asking, "Why can't you make him stop?" The crew members tried once more. A flight attendant knelt near Ravi, her voice soft. "Would you like some water? Something sweet?" She held out a small cup. But Ravi pushed it away without even opening his eyes. Mehul felt his throat tighten. He knew his son's mind worked differently, but to explain it to a cabin full of strangers seemed impossible. He wished they could understand that Ravi was not trying to disturb them, he was only fighting a storm inside himself. At the back of the cabin, Kofi still watched quietly. His grandmother sat beside him, hands folded calmly on her lap. She had seen many journeys in her long life and was not disturbed by the cries. She whispered gently to Kofi, "Sometimes people look only at the noise. You must look at the heart." Kofi nodded. He understood. He could see that Ravi was not angry. He was scared. The boy was like a bird trapped in a cage of sound and light. No one else seemed to see that. They only saw the disturbance. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The tension thickened. Parents with young children held their little ones closer, afraid they might start crying too. A man at the far end pressed the service button, asking if there was a quiet area he could move to. The crew promised to look into it, though they knew no such space existed on this flight. Through it all, Ravi's cries rose and fell, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp. His small body trembled from the effort. Even in his distress, there was something fragile about him, something that pulled gently at the heart. But the noise was too heavy for most to notice that. Mehul closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the times at home when Ravi calmed down at the sight of simple objects, little shapes carved from wood, patterns drawn on paper, or soft tunes sung by his mother. But here in space, nothing was familiar. Everything was new, bright, and loud. "Stay strong, my son," Mehul whispered, though his own strength felt thin. Kofi leaned closer to his grandmother. "He needs something to hold." Something to follow with his hands. The old woman looked at him with a gentle smile. And who will give it to him? Kofi glanced down at his small bag. Inside was a wooden carving shaped like a small bird. His grandmother had given it to him before the journey. She had said, "This little bird will remind you of home when you feel lost." Kofi touched it gently, feeling the smooth curves under his fingers. He wanted to give it to Ravi. But he hesitated. He was only a boy. The cabin was full of adults, important people, even the wealthy trader himself. Would anyone listen if he tried? His grandmother's voice was calm, steady. Kindness does not ask for permission. It only asks for courage. Kofi held the carving tightly. He looked again at Ravi, still curled and crying, and felt his heart pull him forward. At the same time, Mehul sat frozen. He wondered if the passengers would complain formally, if the crew would ask him to move, or if the journey would remain heavy from beginning to end. For the first time in many years, he felt powerless. Wealth could buy comfort, but it could not calm a child's heart. The cries echoed again, sharp and painful. Some passengers covered their ears now, shaking their heads. The moment felt as though it might never end. And yet, in the middle of that restless cabin, a small choice was about to be made. A boy with nothing but a wooden carving in his hand was preparing to step into the silence between cries. He did not know what would happen. He only knew he wanted to help. The journey was far from over. The tension still pressed heavily on every traveler. But soon, something unexpected would break through that weight, something no one could have imagined. The Aurora line moved silently across the dark sea of space. Inside the cabin, the cries of Ravi still echoed, though his voice had grown weaker from exhaustion. His small body shook as he pressed himself against the seat, hands covering his ears. Passengers shifted again, trying to make themselves comfortable despite the noise. Some had grown used to it, but others looked restless, glancing at the crew as if waiting for someone to fix the problem. The crew members walked softly down the aisle, but even they could not calm the boy. Mehul sat with his head bowed. His heart ached for his son. He whispered again and again, "Ravi, my child, it will be okay." But he knew his words were not reaching the boy. Ravi was trapped in his own world, surrounded by walls no one could see. At the back of the cabin, Kofi held the little wooden bird in his hand. His grandmother sat beside him quietly, her wise eyes resting on her grandson. She said nothing more, but the look on her face gave Kofi courage. He stood slowly, his heart beating fast. Every step down the aisle felt heavy. He could feel the eyes of other passengers following him. He was only a small boy in simple clothes. He had no wealth, no status, nothing that could command attention. And yet, he carried something greater than all of that, an honest desire to help. When he reached the seat where Ravi sat with his father, Kofi stopped. He looked at Mehul first, his eyes calm and respectful. Mehul blinked in surprise. He had not expected a child to approach. Kofi spoke softly, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "May I try?" Mehul stared at him, confused. "Try? What do you mean?" Kofi opened his hand to show the small carving. It was smooth, shaped like a bird with wings spread wide. "For him," Kofi said gently. "It helps me when I am afraid." Mehul looked at the boy, then at the wooden carving. For a moment, doubt filled his mind. Could something so small really make a difference when nothing else had worked? But then he looked at Ravi, who was still trembling, lost in fear. Desperation made him nod. "Go ahead," Mehul whispered. Kofi crouched down carefully, moving slowly so he would not frighten Ravi. He held out the wooden bird without speaking. For a long moment, Ravi did not respond. His hands stayed tight on his ears, his eyes closed. But then, through his tears, he noticed the shape being held before him. Something inside him shifted. His cries softened, just a little. His hands loosened enough for one small finger to reach out and touch the carving. The cabin grew silent. Passengers leaned forward, surprised. The sharp cries that had filled the air for so long were now fading, replaced by soft hiccups of breath. Ravi took the wooden bird in both hands. His fingers moved over the smooth surface, tracing the curves of the wings, the shape of the beak, the gentle lines carved into the wood. His eyes opened slightly, focused not on the strangers around him, not on the bright lights, but on the simple carving in his lap. Kofi stayed close, humming quietly. It was a tune his grandmother often sang to him at night, a soft and steady rhythm. He did not sing words, only a sound that rose and fell like the tide. To everyone's surprise, Ravi's breathing began to match the hum. His shoulders stopped shaking so much. His cries grew weaker and weaker until only silence remained. Mehul stared in wonder. He placed a trembling hand on his son's back, feeling the calm return little by little. His eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of relief. For the first time since the journey began, Ravi was still. Around them, the passengers whispered again, but this time the tone was different. It was not irritation. It was amazement. Some smiled softly. Others shook their heads, unable to believe what they had seen. A woman leaned to her neighbor. "That little boy," he calmed him. An elderly man nodded slowly. "Not wealth, not authority. Just kindness." The crew members exchanged looks of surprise as well. One of them whispered, "In all my years, I've never seen anything like it." Kofi did not notice their words. His eyes were only on Ravi. He kept humming until Ravi leaned against his father's arm, clutching the wooden bird tightly. The storm had passed. Mehul looked at Kofi, his voice thick. "Thank you, child. I do not know how you did it, but thank you." Kofi only smiled shyly. "Sometimes we just need something small to hold." His grandmother, still seated at the back, watched with gentle pride. She knew her grandson had done something that would not be forgotten. The Aurora line continued its silent journey across the stars. But inside the cabin, something had changed. The passengers who once frowned now carried thoughtful expressions. The boy who had been ignored at the back was now seen in a new light. And Ravi, the child who had struggled so painfully, now sat quietly, his small fingers wrapped around a carving that had given him peace. No one could explain why it worked. But perhaps it did not need explaining. Sometimes, the simplest things, kindness, patience, a small gift, were greater than all the riches in the galaxy. The story of that moment was only beginning, and soon it would travel farther than anyone could imagine. The great starship Aurora line sailed through the vast space, carrying silence now instead of cries. Ravi sat quietly, holding the little wooden bird close to his chest. His eyes no longer squeezed shut in fear. Instead, they stayed fixed on the carving, his small fingers tracing it again and again. For the first time since the flight began, his breathing was steady. Beside him, Mehul felt as if a heavy stone had been lifted from his heart. His son's calmness brought him relief he could not describe. Yet, what touched him most was not only Ravi's peace, but also how it had come not from money, not from influence, not from his own strength, but from the kindness of a child he had never noticed before. Kofi sat nearby, still humming softly. His eyes sparkled with quiet satisfaction, not pride, but the simple happiness of helping another. His grandmother's smile met his when he returned to his seat. She touched his shoulder gently. "The stars see everything, my child. They will remember this." Around the cabin, the mood had shifted. Passengers who once frowned now watched in silence, thoughtful and humbled. Some exchanged quiet words, while others simply kept their eyes lowered, ashamed that they had judged too quickly. A man leaned to his wife. "We thought wealth could solve everything. But it was that boy." Look what he did. A woman holding her baby whispered, sometimes innocence carries more power than experience. The crew, too, could not stop speaking of it. One attendant said softly to another, I have worked on ships for years. I have seen arguments, fear, even anger. But this is the first time I've seen peace born from such a small act. For Mehul, it was a lesson far greater than any he had learned in trade halls or council chambers. He looked at Kofi, who now sat quietly with his grandmother, and thought, I have lived with wealth all my life, but I have never felt so poor in wisdom. As the hours passed, the cabin grew calm. Passengers returned to their reading, their quiet talks, or their gazing at the stars. Yet the memory of Ravi's cries and Kofi's gift lingered in every heart. The silence was no longer the heavy silence of discomfort. It was the gentle silence of reflection. Outside the window, galaxies stretched endlessly. The ship crossed paths with glowing clouds of stardust and clusters of planets circling faraway suns. Each star seemed to shine brighter than before, as though they too had witnessed the moment inside. In the calm, Ravi began to hum softly, echoing the tune Kofi had shared. His voice was shaky but sweet, almost like a whisper of gratitude. Mehul's eyes filled with tears again, this time from joy. He placed his arm around his son gently, letting him hum without interruption. The sound reached Kofi's ears, and he smiled. He had not expected Ravi to repeat his tune. It was proof that a small connection had been made between them, a bridge built without words. The passengers listened with quiet wonder. Some leaned closer just to hear the soft hum. They knew they would carry this memory long after the journey ended. Then, slowly, conversations began to grow again. But this time they were different. Passengers did not speak of business or complaints. They spoke of life, of lessons, of kindness. One man said, perhaps humans survive not because of their strength, but because of their hearts. Another replied, yes. Empathy is our true power. No machine can build that. The words spread like a soft wave. People spoke of times when small acts had changed their lives, when strangers had shown them kindness without reason. It was as if Kofi's gesture had awakened something buried in them all. Even the crew joined in the quiet discussions. Maybe this is what the galaxy needs, one attendant said. Not faster ships or stronger weapons, but hearts that can see others. Mehul listened to it all, humbled. For years, he had taught himself and others that survival in the galaxy depended on power, position, and riches. Now, in this single flight, he had seen something greater. He whispered to himself, we are more than traders. We are more than explorers. We are human because we can feel for one another. Ravi continued to hum softly, his eyes never leaving the little bird. The wooden carving had become more than an object, it was a key, opening a door inside him that let peace enter. Kofi leaned against his grandmother's shoulder, his eyes growing heavy with sleep. But before drifting off, he looked once more at Ravi and smiled. He did not need thanks. He did not need praise. The calm in Ravi's face was reward enough. As the aurora line glided onward, the stars outside seemed closer than ever. And inside, the passengers realized something important. In the vast galaxy, humans might not be the strongest or the most advanced, but they carried something rare and precious. They carried the ability to comfort, to connect, to calm storms not with power, but with compassion. That truth would stay with them long after they landed. And it was only the beginning of how this simple moment would ripple outward, shaping stories yet to be told. The hours passed quietly on the Aurora line. Ravi, who had once filled the cabin with cries, now sat peacefully beside his father. His small hands still clutched the wooden bird as though it were a treasure carved from light itself. He hummed softly, sometimes smiling, sometimes simply tracing the patterns on the carving. Mehul could hardly believe the change. He had seen his son fall into storms before, but never had he witnessed calm return so gently. His heart was full of gratitude toward the boy who had brought peace when no one else could. Yet as the ship approached its destination, a great orbital station known as the Council Gate, a new tension stirred. The passengers whispered about the meeting that awaited them. The Aurora Line was not an ordinary transport. It carried delegates, traders, and thinkers to a rare gathering, a council where many voices of the galaxy met to discuss peace, trade, and future journeys among the stars. For humans, the gathering was important. Other species had long doubted humanity. They believed humans were fragile, too restless, too emotional to take part in great galactic decisions. Some even said humans could not survive the challenges of unity. But the council had agreed to test them. The test was not of strength or weapons. It was of spirit. Humans were to show their unique qualities before the eyes of the galaxy. If they failed, they would remain outsiders, spoken of as a weak people, unfit for greater roles. Mehul knew this well. He had planned for years to make his mark at the council, to show that human trade and wealth gave them worth. But after what he had seen on the journey, he began to wonder if worth was measured by numbers and riches at all. When the Aurora Line docked at the shining gates of the council station, the passengers stepped out one by one. They walked through halls of glass and silver, where alien symbols glowed on the walls. Creatures of many kinds passed by, tall beings with shimmering skin, others with wings folded neatly, and still others that spoke in tones like music. In the middle of it all, humans walked quietly, feeling the weight of many eyes upon them. The council chamber was vast, shaped like a circle so no voice stood higher than another. Each species had its place. At the center, a clear platform stood empty, waiting for those who wished to prove themselves. The human group gathered together. Mehul stood with them, though his mind was restless. He thought of Ravi, who held his wooden bird tightly, unaware of the importance of the place they had entered. And he thought of Kofi, the boy who had shown kindness when all others failed. The council leader, a being of silver light, spoke. Humans, you have asked to join the circle of voices. But many doubt your readiness. You are known for restlessness. You are known for being ruled by feelings. Today, you will face a trial. You must show what makes your kind worthy. The human leader nodded. We accept. The trial was simple in design but great in meaning. Each group of beings was given the same challenge, to work together in harmony, to solve tasks that required patience, trust, and understanding. It was not about strength or speed. It was about unity. The other species began first. One group moved with perfect precision, their bodies working like parts of a single machine. Another group sang in tones that carried across the hall, building harmony in sound. They were impressive, but their unity came from sameness. Then it was time for the humans. They stepped onto the clear platform, their faces tense. They were not alike in skill, in status, or in thought. They argued quickly, each one offering different ideas. The council chamber filled with uneasy murmurs. Mehul felt his chest grow heavy. This was exactly what the galaxy expected: humans unable to agree, humans too divided to act as one. And then, a soft hum rose. It was Ravi. Sitting at the side of the platform, holding his bird, he began to repeat the tune Kofi had once shared. His voice was shaky, but it carried across the silence. The humans paused. They looked at the child, then at one another. Something shifted in their eyes. Instead of arguing, they began to listen. One by one, they fell into a rhythm of movement, echoing Ravi's simple tune with their actions. They lifted, built, and shaped together, no longer competing, but working in harmony. The council chamber grew quiet. Aliens who once doubted leaned forward, watching with surprise. This was not perfection. It was not like the other groups who moved as one machine. It was something else. It was different voices, different hands, different hearts finding a way to move together despite their differences. When the humans finished, the platform shone with a structure they had built, not flawless, not perfect, but strong because every piece was different yet necessary. The leader of the council rose. You are not the strongest. You are not the most precise. But you are something rare. You find unity not through sameness, but through compassion, patience, and the ability to rise even when divided. This is your gift. Mehul stood in awe, his eyes on Ravi and Kofi. He whispered to himself, it was never about wealth. It was never about power. It was about this. The trial had shown the galaxy something unexpected. Humans were not perfect, but they were resilient, creative, and able to build bridges where none existed. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness on a quiet starship flight. The great chamber of the council was still bright with silence. The humans had finished their part of the trial, and though their work was not perfect, it had a strange beauty that no one could ignore. The structure they had built was uneven in shape, but every piece fit together because each person had added something different. The alien delegates watched closely. Many of them had expected humans to fail. They had expected arguments, confusion, and collapse. Yet what they had seen was something else, an ability to bring differences together and still create harmony. At the edge of the platform, Ravi sat quietly with his wooden bird. His soft hum still lingered in the air, as if the sound itself had guided the humans toward unity. No one could explain how a child's small tune had changed the course of the trial, but everyone had felt its power. Kofi stood nearby, watching with wide eyes. He had never dreamed that the small carving he carried would become part of such an important moment. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind, even the smallest hand can bring comfort. He understood now that comfort could stretch beyond one person, it could reach across an entire gathering. The council leader, a tall being of silver light, finally spoke. His voice was deep yet calm, like water moving across stone. Humans, you have surprised us. You are not perfect, yet you show something rare. You find strength in difference. Where others rely on sameness, you weave many colors into one cloth. This is your way. The human leader bowed. We thank you for seeing us as we are. But some voices in the chamber were still doubtful. A delegate from a winged race stood tall. They stumbled, they argued, they lacked precision. Can such a people truly be trusted with larger matters of the galaxy? The question hung in the air. Many eyes turned back to the humans. Mehul felt his chest tighten. He had once believed wealth and smooth words would prove humanity's worth, but now he knew this was not enough. He looked down at Ravi and thought of the courage it had taken for his child simply to hum in a room filled with strangers. With sudden resolve, Mehul stepped forward. It is true, he said, his voice steady. We stumble. We argue. We are not like those who move as one mind. But we are not weak. We are human. And being human means we do not give up, no matter how divided we are. Even a child's voice can remind us to work together. That is our strength. We can rise again and again, even when we fall. His words carried through the chamber. Some nodded slowly. Others whispered to their neighbors. The council leader's light shimmered brighter. Perhaps unity without struggle is not true unity at all. Perhaps strength lies in learning to rise together, even when you are different. The humans were asked to face one final task, a puzzle of shifting lights that required each participant to trust the timing of the others. Many species had failed this test before, for it demanded not only skill but patience and belief in one another. The humans stepped forward again. At first, their movements were clumsy, and mistakes appeared quickly. But then Ravi lifted his little wooden bird, holding it up high. His hum began again, steady and calm. This time, all the humans followed the rhythm, moving in time with the tune. Piece by piece, the puzzle aligned, lights falling into place like stars forming a constellation. The chamber glowed as the puzzle completed. For the first time in memory, the test had been solved. A hush fell over the council. The delegates looked at one another in disbelief. Where stronger, faster, and more disciplined races had failed, the humans had succeeded not by being perfect, but by trusting one another and moving with a child's simple rhythm. The silver leader raised his hand. It is decided. Humans are not outsiders. They are not fragile shadows in the galaxy. They are a people who carry within them the power of compassion, resilience, and hope. They shall have their place among the voices of the council. Applause filled the chamber, not with thunder, but with gentle respect. The humans stood taller than they had before, their hearts lifted by the knowledge that they had been seen for what they truly were. Mehul knelt beside Ravi, pulling him close. His eyes shone with pride. My son, today you gave us more than peace. You gave us a future. Kofi's grandmother touched her grandson's shoulder and whispered, do you see now? A small act can light a path no one else could see. Kofi nodded, his young heart swelling with quiet joy. He looked at Ravi, who still clutched the wooden bird tightly, and thought, this is what it means to be human. The turning point had come, not through power or riches, but through the gentle strength of empathy. And the galaxy, vast and ancient, had taken notice. The great chamber slowly emptied after the decision of the council. The humans had been accepted, and their voices would now be counted among the stars. Yet what stayed with everyone was not only the puzzle or the speech, but the small, unforgettable moment when a child's humming had brought calm to a restless hall. News of the event spread quickly. Messengers carried it across stations and planets. Traders told it in busy markets, and pilots repeated it in the quiet hours of long journeys. Each retelling was slightly different, but the heart of the story stayed the same. When tension rose and all seemed lost, a boy's gentle sound had reminded humans to move as one. For Ravi, life did not suddenly become easy. He was still quiet, still sensitive to noise, and still preferred to hold his wooden bird close wherever he went. But now, when people looked at him, they did not see only a boy who struggled. They saw a boy who had guided his people through a moment that would never be forgotten. Kofi, too, carried the weight of that day. His grandmother often smiled at him and said, you see, child, it was not only the bird you gave but also your heart. That is what opened the door. Kofi did not always know how to answer, but deep inside, he felt proud. He understood that kindness was stronger than wealth or power. Mehul walked beside his son with a new humility. He no longer thought riches made him greater than others. In the council hall, he had seen how quickly wealth lost its meaning, while a child's soft hum had changed the fate of a people. From that day forward, Mehul promised himself that he would use his voice not to command but to listen, not to boast but to build. The humans returned to their world with joy and hope. Everywhere they went, people asked about the trial, and many wanted to meet Ravi and Kofi. But the boys were not put on display. Instead, the story itself became the gift. Teachers told it in classrooms. Families repeated it at dinner tables. Pilots carried it across distant colonies. And slowly, a new saying began to rise among humans, even the smallest voice can steady the stars. Other species also listened with interest. Some, who once doubted humans, began to see them in a new light. They saw that humans were not the strongest or the most advanced, but they had something else, something rare. They had the ability to find strength in their flaws, to rise after falling, and to discover hope where others saw only failure. Ravi, sitting by a window one evening, watched the sky filled with stars. He held the wooden bird in his hands and felt calm. He did not know the weight of history that rested on his shoulders, but he knew that when he hummed, his father smiled, and his friend Kofi joined in. That was enough for him. Kofi often dreamed of the stars. He imagined himself as a traveler, carrying stories from one world to another. His grandmother told him that stories were stronger than any weapon, because they lived in the hearts of people and could not be taken away. The boy believed her. And one day, he decided, he would tell their story to strangers on faraway worlds. As for the council, they never forgot what they had seen. Whenever debates grew too heated, some delegates would whisper to one another, "Remember the human boy." It became a gentle reminder that peace was not built by force, but by patience and empathy. Time moved forward. The humans grew in their place among the stars. They still stumbled, they still argued, but they never forgot the lesson of that day. Each time they doubted themselves, they remembered the puzzle of light, the uneven structure, and the child's hum that held them together. On one special day, many years later, the humans built a hall of their own on their home world. It was not the grandest or the most perfect, but inside, carved above the entrance, were simple words, "Even the smallest hand can bring comfort. Even the smallest voice can guide us home." Visitors came from many planets to see the hall. They did not come only to look at the walls or the carvings. They came to feel the spirit of the story, to remind themselves that greatness does not always come from power. Sometimes it comes from a boy holding a bird, and another boy offering friendship. And so, the story of Ravi and Kofi became part of human history, a light passed from one generation to the next. In every version, the message remained: humanity was not defined by riches or strength, but by its heart. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars. Yet, on that day in the council chamber, it was a small human voice that shone the brightest. And as long as stories were told, that light would never fade.